Hello and welcome to the Agricultural Engineering Podcast. This podcast covers all aspects of agricultural engineering. It is produced by the South African Institute of Agricultural Engineers. The series of episodes that will be brought to you has been funded by the Royal Academy of Engineering. We encourage you to tune in and explore the exciting world of agricultural engineering with us. My name is Kutazo Ntsue and I'm your host for today's episode. Welcome back to the Agricultural Engineering Podcast. I know it's been a minute, but we are back still exploring ideas and innovations in agricultural engineering with people who are shaping the field. Today we are going to explore the journey of an agricultural engineer who is working in sustainable irrigation and water management, Miss Isobel van der Stoep, a professionally registered agricultural engineer with over 25 years of experience across Africa. Isobel's career spans irrigation design, water measurement, subsurface drainage, training, consulting, and large-scale project management. She has worked in South Africa, Mozambique, Eswatini, Namibia, Angola, Malawi, and Tanzania, bringing practical solutions to some of the region's most challenging water and irrigation environments. She has also held leadership positions as president of the South African Institute of Agricultural Engineers between 2013 and 2017 and the South African Irrigation Institute between 2008 and 2009, contributing to shaping the direction of agricultural engineering. Welcome, Isobel, to the Agricultural Engineering Podcast, and thank you for taking your time to be with us today.
Thank you so much, Kutacho, and thanks for the invitation from Siley.
So, I could not put you in a box. Your professional journey is one of the most inspiring journey I've ever witnessed. From working in academia with small farmer irrigation development, and now you manage large sugarcane estates in Eswatini, Zambia, Malawi, and Tanzania. What initially drew you to the field of irrigation engineering?
Yeah, it's been quite a journey already, and it's been a very, very satisfying one, and I'm very grateful for all the opportunities I've had over the years. And I think before one talk about irrigation engineering, maybe just agricultural engineering. So when I had decided what I wanted to study, I had two big boxes to tick, and then one was I wanted to work outside, or to have the opportunity to work outside, but I also didn't particularly want to work with people. I didn't want to manage people, work with them that much. So, and that's how I ended up doing or studying agricultural engineering. And getting into irrigation particularly, I think that was pure luck. And it's, again, when I was studying, at the end of the first year, it wasn't actually compulsory for us to do vacation work. But I wanted to, so I went to the was then still Department of Agriculture, and it was now the ARC's Agricultural Engineering Institute in Pretoria. And I said, I'm a first-year student, can I do some holiday work in that December? And in that year, they placed me in the Directorate for Irrigation Engineering. And at the time, they were actually busy compiling the Irrigation Design Manual. So that's how I got into it. It was purely by luck, and I don't regret it for a day. After that, I stayed involved with the people from the first year's work, and eventually it also helped me to get my first job, and it really set me up for life.
And to think that the irrigation manual is still being used today in lectures. But that's not the only thing you've contributed to that still has impact today. Earlier, when you started your career, you worked on the National Water Act. How did that experience shape your understanding of water governance and efficiency?
Yeah, it was, to be honest, when I started working, when I got my first position, I was working for MBB, and I was specifically MBB Consulting Engineers, but specifically in a section within the engineering firm that was contracted to provide that consultation service for the National Water Act. And in that time, they were also looking at the Irrigation Act, and a lot of things were going on. And when you start working and you don't have any context of how things work, or how politics work and things like that, you don't realize that this was a once in a life opportunity, because it's
Mm.
not often that any country compiles or writes a new act, and even a new water act. So
Mm.
at the time, I was not that happy about doing the work, because actually I felt that I just come out of university and I've learned all these
Mm.
important engineering things, and now I end up doing this sort of consulting work where we driving people around, we're having a lot of meetings and talking a
Mm.
lot and writing long documents, and I was actually a bit frustrated with the process at the beginning. But looking back, it was such a unique opportunity, because the people that you were introduced to, that went on for long after that, to open doors and to help one understand things better. So it really was at that time I didn't appreciate it too much, but
Yeah.
looking back and later on, when we started looking at other research on governance, and it really set me up for life as well.
Now, thinking about the Water Act and its intention, and looking at the current status of water infrastructure in South Africa, where some communities don't have water, I'm talking about not for irrigation, but merely for household users. Where do you think things went wrong, and do you still think there's proper governance according to the Water Act?
Yeah, yeah. I think we need another whole hour of discussion on that. But at the
Yeah.
time, that new National Water Act of 1998 was probably the best water act in the world, when it was written. And it still is. But implementing something is quite a different kettle of fish. I think that's where maybe we dropped the ball a little bit. We had a really good act. But when we got to the implementation side, I don't think we succeeded in implementing it as it was intended. It it it's still there, and there's nothing stopping us from still trying to implement it. But I think at
Mm.
this stage, we're not definitely not 100% there. We're probably between 15 and 60% on how we are making use of all the mechanisms that's available to us.
So those contributions towards the Irrigation Design Manual as well as the Water Act drafting were not the only place where you found yourself challenging yourself to work with people. You've continuously worked with people to a point when you even led Sabin, and you also led the South African Institute of Agricultural Engineers. So how did those roles influence your vision for sustainable irrigation in South Africa?
Yeah, it was privileged to act in both of those capacities for the times that it was. I think with the Irrigation Institute, it was around 2008, and
Mm.
then with the Institute for Agricultural Engineers, it was around 2013 to 2014.
Mm.
Yeah, and again, I think, like you said earlier, I wanted to study engineering because I didn't want to work with people. But they're
Yeah.
just everywhere. You cannot get away from them. So, um,
Yeah,
yeah,
I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, you're back to people again.
again, yeah, and I mean, even before that, I was a lecturer at the university. I mean, it's just people everywhere.
Yes.
Cannot get away from them. But anyway, I think as you grow through your career also, um
Mm.
then you start interacting with people who are talking about the same things as you, and that are thinking the same way as you. Yeah, and I think people became easier to work with, or became easier to interact with them. If the more you know about a topic, it becomes easier. And I think the councils for these institutes that I was privileged enough to be elected as a president. It's a lot of knowledgeable people and older people that you can learn a lot from, and I particularly enjoyed that. I think it also teaches one a lot about meeting structures, about understanding constitutions and interpreting that, and the importance of having structures in place to manage things. So I think it also, probably the most valuable lesson was around the importance of our agriculture engineering industry out there, the businesses.
Mm,
That's something that you don't always get exposure to when you're doing academics and things like that. But when you
mm,
start sitting on these councils, then you realize we're so dependent on them for
mm,
VAC work for the students, for sponsoring
mm,
of events, and for places for people to go and work.
mm.
So I think it's really important to have that link with the industry, and that's where the councils of these different institutes plays an important role.
So, what was the outcome that you were most proud of from being a president of any of these organizations?
Yeah, I think the majority of my what I really felt I achieved something was around the South African Irrigation Institute, or SABI
Mm,
as we refer to it by its Afrikaans acronym.
mm,
We really pushed the boundaries there. We started an in-house magazine where before it was done by an outside company, publishing house, and we really grew the training program there, and really made very strong bonds with the industry to support that. So I think, yeah, putting that SABI training program in place together with the SABI councils over various years, and of course with Rihanna Lombard, the general manager at the time,
mm.
it was really, I think, the thing that I'm the proudest of, that I did. And there were a lot of people involved even.
So, to our listeners who don't know about the Sabi magazine, we'll share the link to the magazine in the description box. Let's move on now, Isabel, to talk about some of your uh, activities in your professional journey. You've worked in sustainable irrigation practices, and one of them was implementing water irrigation measurement solutions. Why is accurate water measurement such a critical foundation of sustainability?
Yeah, that is where I started to get involved in when I did my master's, and it
Mm,
was again a result of a project that was offered to us at the University of Pretoria. At the time, I was a junior lecturer in
mm,
irrigation, and the Water Research Commission of South Africa came to us and said that they want to do this work on water metering. And it was actually an outcome from that National Water Act, where everything started, because part of the National Water Act makes provision for measuring and implementing measuring, and the Water Research Commission saw this opportunity or need to, for us to know more about measurement, and specifically measuring of raw water, which is not the same as measuring municipal water, which is clean. And um, in terms of solutions that I've implemented, I cannot unfortunately claim anything for myself to have implemented. But I was involved with various irrigation boards, water user associations,
mm,
and even individual farmers that wanted to measure. And I think the interesting thing today is that um, now that I'm working outside of the country in
mm,
our neighboring countries further north,
mm.
they really have a lot of water, and South Africa is really a water scarce country. We
Ah,
always say, yeah, we're a water scarce country, but you don't actually realize how scarce it is until you start working in countries where there is an abundance of water. And that is why the measurement is so important. But yet it's really difficult to implement because it's a tool to it's a means to an end. Nobody gets up in the morning and say, I'm going to install a water meter today just
yeah,
because I feel like it. It's something that you do because there's a trigger. Either you need to prove that you're not using more water than what you're supposed to be using, or there's a dispute with somebody who's trying to control the amount of water that you're using.
yeah.
And if there's not a trigger, people don't measure. They just carry on from day to day. So I think the technology has come a long way. I think we
Mm,
also have a lot of solutions around monitoring that's improved largely, as the have improved. Just to be able to collect the data continuously and be able to analyze it, and as we are progressing more with artificial intelligence and having
yeah.
large data, if you have the data and you've got the capacity to interpret it, then it becomes really useful and it becomes easier as well. But
Mm,
in the beginning, it was really hard to get measurement implemented, and I think it's even now still people almost have to be forced to implement it.
I understand in South Africa it's an issue of you must not use too much water because we have scarcity. In other countries, what is what where there's abundance of water, are there policies around that as well, or is it just something that is being done to make sure everybody uses a specific amount of water for irrigation purposes or farming, if I can say,
Yeah, look, it's
activities?
of course it's a sorry, it's a very basic building block for
Mm,
assessing sustainability.
mm,
So even in other countries where I work, there are water permits that people have to apply for,
mm,
and then also just in the group that I'm working now in ABF Sugar. When I joined them, they were already busy with a process of implementing bulk water measurement as part of their ESG drive or their sustainability program. So
yeah.
it should be a thing that you want to do without having to be forced to do it. It's the right thing to do. So but it's a bit like, it's also good to monitor the fuel consumption in your vehicle, but we all don't all
Yes.
do it. But yes, it is an important tracker for
Mm,
sustainability. And I think as our neighboring countries, we've got an abundance of water,
mm.
also expand and grow, there will be pressure on them as well.
For
We've
sustaining.
just in South Africa, we've really developed the resource, I think, to the extent that we can. There's not much more left to develop, and that's why the measuring is so important, because it's a shared resource.
You mentioned that measuring is a building block for sustainable water use. And what are some of the practices you've seen are contributing to inefficiencies in irrigation? And how have engineers been resolving these inefficiencies throughout the years?
Yeah, and then I think now we're back to the human factor again.
Yes.
Um, I think as engineers, we can design perfect systems. We can design
Mm,
beautiful engineering solutions, but at the end of the day, somebody has to use it. Some person has to switch it on and off.
mm,
And I think that's where most of the inefficiencies occurs, is where the interaction is between this beautiful engineering solution that we have designed and handing it over to the end user and expecting them then to operate it in the way that you intended it to be operated as the designer. I
mm,
think that's where the biggest challenge lies. I mean, a system can be tuned to be perfect.
mm.
You can choose everything correctly. You can run it. You can set it at the right pressures and everything. But if something deviates from that because of human interaction or lack of human interaction, then it actually, I think that's where the inefficiencies occurred. I think to a large extent, irrigation technology is developed to such an extent that even the best, or any manufacturer solution actually can do a very good job. It's nothing wrong with the technologies anymore, but it's how we apply it and how we train the people that must use it.
So, is end user training part of every project that you implement?
Yes, it should be, and
Mm.
even in the projects that I'm involved in, we normally put it as a project deliverable at the end to say that there should be training involved.
Working across the continent, I know you've seen a lot, you've experienced a lot, but what is that unique challenge that you've experienced that even today it sticks with you and sticks in your mind?
If you're working outside of South Africa, a lot of things that we
Mm,
take for granted in South Africa
mm,
is not necessarily available there. And probably the biggest engineering challenge, and this is going to sound funny, but
mm.
is access to space, having access to space, to fix things.
Oh,
If you don't have a supplier in the country, it has to be imported, which means it could take 2, 3 weeks, months to get something, and it sounds like such a minor thing, but the ability to keep spares, to keep your systems in a running condition, and everything that goes around that. Yeah, I think it's probably one of the biggest challenges to running any sort of technical system in Africa. It's really is one of the biggest challenges.
Considering the climate variability within the different countries that you've worked in, and having worked mostly in South Africa, what have you had to push yourself to do in terms of your technical knowledge in engineering design that was unique from what you were familiar with?
Yeah, so the company that I'm working for now, the design work is mostly done by consulting engineers. So we don't do the designs ourselves, but we do set up the scope of work or the terms of reference for
Yeah.
those projects.
Mm-hmm.
And the company that I'm working for now, ABF Sugar, we've got sugar estates from Eswatini in the south, which is about 30 degrees south, and then Zambia, Malawi, and up to Tanzania, which is about 8 degrees south of the equator.
Mm.
So a couple of interesting things. Obviously, the closer you get to the equator, the higher the rainfall.
Yeah.
So there is in terms of an annual demand on the irrigation, it's a little bit less. But if you look at your daily maximums, it can still get to a 7 or 8 millimeter per day daily demand, which is interesting because it doesn't vary that much across the whole group. But we're growing the same crop, of course, so it's very
Mm.
limited in um, that consideration. But what is interesting to me is that, if you look at the Enzo weather phenomenon,
Mm.
which is what most people know as El Nino and La Nina.
Yes, yes.
So for South Africa, where we live, most of us, La Nina means it's a wet year. It's above average rainfalls, and El Nino is a dry year. It's droughts and late rain and all sorts of complications around that.
Mm.
And it's interesting if you go towards the north of Malawi and Tanzania, it actually swaps around. An El Nino year there is a wet year, and a La Nina year is a dry year. So I never knew that. So it's something that you have to make provision for, and some of the plans that we make. I think probably the lessening predictability of the climate is a massive challenge for us.
Mm.
Not to design the systems per se, but how we
Mm.
operate the systems. Um, and then the other thing that I think is really important that I've seen is deforestation. And you might ask, but why is that now an issue? In the
Mm.
countries where trees have been cut down, we
Mm.
see very, very high rates of sedimentation and siltation of your rivers
Ah.
and your drains. And you cannot believe the effect that that has on an irrigated estate. It just causes flooding because your riverbed that used to be maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 meters deep, or now becomes 1 meter deep. And in some cases, even the riverbeds are higher than the surrounding areas, and you just
Mm.
get more and more flooding events. And if you
Yeah.
add to that, then also um, more unpredictable rainfall patterns or higher
Mm.
rainfall amounts per event, then it's just a recipe for disaster. And we are seeing this. We're definitely
Mm.
seeing it happening.
So with the challenge of deforestation, what are you doing to ensure productivity in your fields?
Yeah, we're spending a lot of time and energy into developing what we call drainage master plans, which is
Mm-hmm.
basically investigating the topography of the areas that we farm, and
Mm.
then to identify the causes and the places where we have drainage problems, and then come up with solutions on how to address that. So I think. Look, traditionally, irrigation and drainage has been a package deal, and maybe even more so in other parts of the world than what we have known in South Africa and in Africa. But what's definitely happening is that it's becoming drainage first. You first drain and then you put the irrigation over the top.
Okay. For you to come up with solutions for irrigation and drainage, you had to become an approved irrigation designer. So you are an approved designer and an evaluator. How does one become an approved irrigation designer and an evaluator?
Those two names that you use there, the irrigation designer and evaluator, is actually a membership category within SABI, the South African Irrigation Institute. They have an exam that you can write, and then if you get 70% or above, then your membership status then gets converted to a SABI approved irrigation designer. So, and the same with the evaluator, that is not actually a exam, but it is a course that you have to do with them. And if you are an approved designer and you also do the evaluation course, then you also can add that to your name. So this is a very specific membership category of the South African Irrigation Institute,
Yeah.
that was developed in the late 1990s, or in the 1990s, and they've been carrying on with that ever since. Yeah, that's where it comes from.
How valuable is it for someone who's involved in irrigation design to have this membership?
Yeah, I think the importance of the Irrigation Institute is their very close ties with the industry.
Yeah.
And yeah, look, there is the whole story about the EXA prescribing engineering work, and things around that. So I think there are some things there that still needs to be sorted out. But SABI, the Irrigation Institute, is also a member of EXA. And they're also a member of SAIDI. So I think they're working closely together with EXA and with the South African Institute for Agricultural Engineers to make sure that the best solutions are put forward. I think a lot of the EXA work is often, if you look at the history of EXA, also there's a very big safety aspect there, that the responsibility that you carry as an engineer, just to sign off on things which are safe. In the case of agricultural engineering, it could be like dam wall failures or other work that have potentially life-threatening consequences should they fail. So I think it's also a matter of looking at the scale of things and the level of responsibility that is needed. I think one of the things when you become a professional engineer with EXA, I think one of the things we always tell the candidate engineers is that when you've just registered, you're very dangerous because you got the letters behind your name, but you actually don't have all the experience yet. And it's a big responsibility with knowing what you can do and what you shouldn't be doing. And I think it's difficult to put that into a law or a regulation or something. But it's about the way that we train the people, that the next generation that's doing the work, and the awareness and that comes with it. Just because you are qualified, or just that because you got a certain designation behind your name, you should always ask, am I qualified to do this work? It's actually one of the 4 steps to safety as well. So it's all, you should always be asking yourself that.
As you're reminding the young engineers to be responsible for their actions, what are some of the key competences they should have or develop for safe practice of irrigation engineering and design?
Yeah, I think there's technical competencies, and then there are sort of the softer skills. And I think over time the university is always trying to build in the softer skills, but I think it's a lot of that you learn only when you start working and you get exposed to a workplace environment. And that's why the place where you go and work is so important. with their, it's about the culture that is there, and whether the way they practice things, the way they develop their young engineers.
Mm,
But I think, in terms of competencies that people tend to maybe forget about a little bit is probably time management is one of the critical ones.
mm,
We live in an age where we are appointing fewer and fewer people and trying to do more and more work, and
mm,
there are a lot of tools out there that you can use, and artificial intelligence is coming in. There's a whole lot of software and things that we use to make everything go faster, and needing fewer people to do the job. But
mm,
the trap is time. Is you end up working after hours, you end up working through weekends, and I think time management is really critical, and just keeping that balance. Then yeah, obviously the technical skills is important. You got to stay up to date with things are developing. I think
mm,
in today's day life, especially in agriculture, is having good GIS skills
mm.
is really critical. A little bit of programming, but I mean, even in a GIS environment, you can do a bit of programming, but yeah, just to be really good at spatial sort of software, I think that will take you a long way.
Yeah. And from your knowledge, besides I think when you mentioned the GIS and programming, what are some of the knowledge gaps you've observed for people who end up practicing as irrigation engineers or specializing in irrigation engineering? What are some of the knowledge gaps you've noticed? Typical in South Africa, or I can say in Africa, because you've worked to a certain extent, I believe, with engineers in the continent as well.
Yeah, I think the one thing that stands out to me is lack of soil knowledge.
Mm,
And both in irrigation as well as in the mechanization environment, because there are so many tools available, and so many sources of data,
mm,
people neglect to go out into the field, dig a
mm,
profile hole, climb in the hole with all the necessary safety practices,
mm.
and look at the profiles and look at the water tables, and really understand soils. And yeah, I think that's something where we really we're
Yeah.
really lacking there a little bit. Yeah.
I agree with you there. I think it's in practice is a scarce skill among agricultural engineers. So let's talk about your current role now, managing large-scale sugarcane estates. What are some of the transitions you've had to go through in order to take up that role?
Yeah, I think there's two things that stand out for me. The one
Mm,
is being in operations. There's a lot of um, very not big decisions, but a lot of decisions being made in a very short space of time. So you almost got to think on your feet the whole time, and
mm,
compensate for that. There's no time to go and investigate something in detail and then to make a decision. You need to make the decision now, or in the next 5 minutes, or in the next half an hour, and because
mm,
it has an effect. So coming from a research environment and training, which is incredibly structured and well
yeah,
prepared, that was very hard for me to move over into an operations environment. And then I'd still say, even if you look at all these personality tests and things that you do, I am more of a strategic person rather than a operational person. So is probably that's probably the hardest thing for me, is to adjust to
yeah,
that operational environment. And then the second thing is the sheer scale of the estates.
yeah.
Where if you do a simple design for a farmer in South Africa, you're
Mm,
lucky if it's 200 hectares. Our
okay.
estates, we irrigate about 56,000 hectares, and it's divided to 5 estates. So it's
Mm,
huge, and it's just the sheer scale of it, to get solutions that work at that scale.
yeah. You also develop guidelines and do quality checklists. What best practices have you identified as non negotiables for sustaining sugarcane fields?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is aligning with the other disciplines within the company, especially from a human resource perspective. So when you start developing guidelines and things like that, you know, it's sometimes really hard to understand or it's not hard, but you first have to find out exactly how does the 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 labor side of things work. Things like shifts and seasons
Mm,
and it's just amazing and structures, you know. How do people report into managers? Are they reporting into an engineering manager or reporting into a crop production manager?
mm,
Um, you know, and because if you don't first unpack that structure and make sure that you understand how the reporting structure work, it's
mm,
really tough to set up a practice or a checklist or any guideline that is going to work.
yeah.
If you don't, you need to make it applicable to the situation. If you're working theoretical and you know from having started out with a rather academic and theoretical first couple of years of my probably first 10 to 15 years actually.
Yeah.
You know, once you hit the practice and you see, hey, this is not so easy. And
Mm,
it's almost a different set of street smart skills that you need to be able to negotiate that. And I think if you're working in another country where cultures are different, you got to respect
mm.
that. Um, yeah, and to us, safety is a big thing. We have a lot of employees. We've got a lot of contractors. We work inside communities. There are people moving through the farming area at the same time as what there are big haulage trucks and machinery moving around. So there are schools on the premises with children moving around on the roads. So
Mm.
I think that's the reality of the environment in which you're working and really understanding that, which can take years for a specific site. I think that's really important. We cannot just engineer in isolation. I think that's the
Yeah.
important thing.
Are you aware of technology developments and practices that are defining the irrigation field in recent years?
Yeah, I think the actual technologies that we use to apply the water has not changed that much over years, but I
Mm,
think the remote monitoring is for sure to me the silver bullet. You know, to be able to anytime, day or night, be able to see what your irrigation system is doing, whether it's
mm,
running correctly, whether it's on, whether it's off. Um, you know, that is exciting. That is really something new, and then integrating it maybe with cameras,
yeah.
with security systems and engineering out a lot of problems of managing it, you know, preventing somebody that have to get up 2 o'clock in the morning to go check whether a dam is overflowing, you know, that can now get
Yeah.
an alarm on his phone while he's sleeping, waking him up saying, hey, the dam is 1 meter from its limit, you know, we're going to switch the
Yeah.
pumps off. You know, the remote monitoring and control options around irrigation systems is just phenomenal.
Mm.
I think that's really where it's going to be a big part of our future.
And is that maybe transforming the theft that used to be a big problem in irrigation, whether it's stealing of a component, a pump, or whatnot? Is that transforming, also resolving that issue?
Yeah, I think that if you want to engineer that out, it starts from the design, you know, thinking
Mm.
about how you're going to install cables and different
Ah,
components and how you're
yeah.
going to secure it. So it's always easier to get it right from the beginning than try to add it on later on. But it's definitely, yes, it's definitely remote monitoring definitely contributes to creating a more secure environment.
What is that one policy you would implement to achieve sustainable irrigation and water management in South Africa?
Hey, I think I think soil conservation. I think soil conservation has fallen by the wayside. The Department of Agriculture that's still probably supporting it, I think, is probably a little bit
Mm,
light on resources. And having seen what I've seen in Malawi and Tanzania, where you've got massive siltation of your rivers. If that should happen in South Africa, and it probably is already to some degree, we're going to have much worse problems. So I think if one can reinforce or reinstate soil conservation technicians and the soil conservation practices that were in place, I think that would be the one thing that I would want to do.
What message would you give to that young engineer who is listening to the podcast?
Yeah, I said a while ago, I think it was still part of the South African Institute for Agricultural Engineer meetings, and when I was still on the council there, and to me, I would like a student or a person considering a career not to say, I want to become an agricultural engineer or I want to become an irrigation engineer. Well, you should actually say, I want to go and work at this and this place. And that is what I want to do there. Because, and then you set yourself up for saying, okay, but if I want to go and be an irrigation engineer at a consulting engineering firm, what do I need to study? What is the best route for me to get there? The problem is for you to know that that is what you want to do at a very specific workplace, you need exposure. So it takes you a little bit back to say, all right, I want to study engineering, but where am I going to work one day? And I think it's really important from the very first year of studies that people get out there, try to do their VAC work, try, even if they volunteer, even if they work for free, even if they just shadow somebody, get as much exposure to the workplace from day one, because that is where you're going to make contacts and that is where you're going to get your job. It's not from applying for jobs on the internet, sending your CV. That is not what gets you a job. What gets you a job is experience and exposure and meeting people. So go to your SANI meetings, go to your SABI meetings, meet people, find out what they do. That is going to help you get started in life. I think a lot of young people, and it's not only in engineering, people go and study something, and then they get the degree or the certificate or whatever they did, and then they can't find work. But while you're a student and you have got a little bit of freedom, try to find out about workplaces. Don't wait until you're in your last year or the last month of your studies. Do it from day one.
You've said a mouthful, Isobel, today, and we thank you for taking time from your busy schedule to talk to us today. We really appreciate it. Until the next time, thank you very much.
Thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate it.
Well, that was it from Miss Isobel van der Stoep, who talked with us about her journey in irrigation engineering. Thank you for listening to the Agricultural Engineering Podcast. Please don't forget to like, share with your family, share with your friends, and anyone who might have interest. For more information, you can check in the description box. And with that said, until the next episode, it is goodbye for now.